Alhamdulillah, our gratitude to Allah for having able us to be here on this very blessed Sunday. What will be is the 19th day, 18th day of Ramadan, Alhamdulillah, 18th day of fasting. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all of our ibadah, inshallah, and increase us in our iman and our taqwa, inshallah, until our very last days. Ameen. Ameen, Ya Rabbil Alameen. So, Alhamdulillah, we are still at seniority. But we're at page 20. 26, inshallah. Yeah, okay. Second paragraph, 26, inshallah. In the age, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. And Imam al-Haddad had mentioned, says in his book, in the age of seniority, people's dominant state is to revert to God. And this is a very important note that we should have. And yesterday also we were talking quite a bit about this, the importance of having long life that is full of good deeds. Yeah, a long life that is adorned with good deeds. So yesterday we were talking about this. I have not yet uploaded the recording, inshallah, because there's still one more recording at the center that I need to upload first, inshallah. I'll do that when I get there, inshallah. So it is important to have a long life that is adorned with good deeds. So for us, what we need to do is the importance of returning back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so this is what Imam Haddad is saying, to revert to God. To be in a state that we are continuously being reminded that we are going to go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this starts with reminding the self. Now, what we should look at is we should remind the inner self. So this is where it's interesting. Like the Arabic word for nafs is also close to nafis. Nafis here means something which is very precious, like a very precious gemstone. So nafs also means your essence, which is very precious. Your essence, which is very precious. So the essence of the self here is the ruh, of course. And that is the self that is going to return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, if we look at Al-Fatiha, so in fact, you can study the whole of Aqidah in Al-Fatiha, because there is the part on Rububiyyah where Allah speaks to us, where we are introduced to about Allah. And then there is about eschatology, about the end of times, as in the days to come, that we see Allah as Maliki Yawmiddin, etc. And then there's the part of Ubudiyyah, Iyyaka na'budu wa Iyyaka nasta'in. So all of this is to remind ourselves that the essence within is worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's not just worshipping Allah externally, but it is a way of reminding ourselves, the Al-Fatiha, that the essence is going to return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So to be careful to gather provisions for the life to come. And we've covered this quite a bit yesterday. So to make sure that we have done in good deeds, and to not, one of the things that the Prophet ﷺ has mentioned is to not look down on small deeds. To not look down on the small deeds. And the other thing about deeds is that it is best that it is done with consistency. Right? Best done with consistency. And those are the deeds that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likes, and that He is rida with, inshallah. So if you were to plan yourself, example about deeds, and I've mentioned this before in my classes, there are deeds that we should be doing daily. And then there are deeds that we should be doing weekly, ibadah deeds. And then there are deeds that we should be doing monthly. And there are deeds that we should be doing once in our lifetime. And, Ramadan is something that we do yearly. And what are the ibadah that we can do yearly? And this is Ramadan. But in that ibadah that we do yearly, what is it that we can do daily? Daily in the month of Ramadan that we do once a year, that kind of thing. Maybe heighten the reading of Al-Quran or increase in the seeking of Allah's forgiveness. So really just exerting oneself to be doing good deeds in this month of Ramadan, because we're definitely 1 year older this Ramadan than we were before the Ramadan in the previous years. So how have we improved? And how have our ibadah improved? And like yesterday, what we've mentioned from the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, if Allah increases your life, and He would also increase the good therein as well, the goodness therein. So if we are fortunate enough that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has increased our life this 1 year, then what are the good deeds? So we should also see, as much as Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as we know, nubuwah is given. Nubuwah is not something that one can achieve. But if we look properly, the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even before nubuwah, he exerted himself to do good deeds. And that part is his effort. Those are his effort. How he saved himself from the lifestyle of the Quraysh. He was humble, how he helped people, how he stayed up at night to worship Allah, how he went into states of seclusion. All of those were his effort. And that brought him to a state of wilaya. Of course, he is preserved, etc. But he did show effort. That is for us to learn, to inherit and to practice. That we must also exert ourselves and remind our youth to exert themselves to be doing good deeds. And like I say, good deeds is not just worshipping, but how do we make our life a life of worship? It's two different things. And not just worshipping and then you go back to life. No. But how do we make our life a life of worship? So that when we reach seniority, like what Imam al-Haddad, rahmatullah alayhi, is showing and speaking and is reminding us, we don't have to struggle to make our life a life of worship. It becomes something which is automatic, that we would revert to Allah in this. Because there would be challenges that we would face when we reach that stage in life. Okay? And Al-Haddad says, to gather provision for the life to come. Yeah? To renounce the things of the world and do their utmost in obedience. When success in this is granted, when success in this is granted them, it is the age of dignity, reverence, and total avoidance of jest and levity. So basically, when we reach this age, we cry more than we laugh, and this is the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because we're actually getting ready for departure. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us so much barakah in terms of being able to see and to live. That means the risk here is the life, and He has given us many opportunities for us to return back to Him. So we should be in a state of more serious in our worship. And a small point that is very important, but it goes a long way in making our life a life of worship, is by taking care of our Islamic calendar. And this is something one of my teachers said to us many years ago, when we were first learning. And then he says, you need to take care of your Islamic calendar, especially here in Singapore, where we live mostly with the Gregorian calendar. And taking care of the Islamic calendar means that we know how the moon works. We know how when are the most important days. And we know when are the time of prayer, not just based on our calculation, but also based on what we see in the horizon, and to have in-depth knowledge of that. And that is important, inshallah, because if not, then it is easy for the modern world to manipulate us, and because of many reasons, they can say many reasons, and then we won't be able to know if it is right or wrong, because anybody can just come in with corrupted knowledge and just twist our life of worship upside down. And that's why, Sheikh Hamza was saying this. He says, in the Maliki madhab, the first thing they study about when they study Fardu Ain is they study about the ability to look at the time of prayer just by looking at the sun. And in the Shafi'i madhab, the first thing we study about in Fardu Ain is Babu Tahara, the chapter of purity. Right? So that didn't mean that our Sheikh in Shafi'i did not teach us. Yeah, it is taught. My son bought a book when we were in JB, like 2 visits ago, and it was a book that spoke about the laws of prayer, and it was included comics illustration as well. And it was a very good book. At that level of asas, the foundational level, they already said, okay, if you put a stick, how far should you see the shadow? It's been taught. At a foundational level, how do we look at the sun to know the Qibla? Yeah. Especially when we're traveling, etc. So these are important knowledge for us to cover, and it brings out the logic within the self. So most of us, we live in a world that we are being fed with information. We're fed with knowledge. But we're not taught how to think with that information. We're not taught how to think with that knowledge. And that in itself is dangerous. When we know how to take knowledge, but we're not able to think. We're not able to go deeper with it. Because what the hadith says, if we practice what we know, Allah will teach us what we don't. Okay? And I try my best to live with that hadith. In fact, that is one of my philosophy, or the hadith that guides me in my life. I first heard that hadith from my grandfather, and it's true. But in order to see that hadith comes out to success, to give us a tawfiq, we must be able to think. So if you've been taught what you know, so you've been taught and you practice what you know, and you keep doing it, it is not just to reach to a state that it becomes mechanical. It's just doing it. It becomes habitual. What needs to happen out of that is that you need to see how you think. You need to observe yourself. That's the word. Observe yourself before and after the worship. And then we'll start to see the effect that worship has on our lives. Now, there are verses in the Quran that if we see, example, misal, Surah Fatiha, Surah Al-Ikhlas, Surah Yasin, Ayatul Kursi, these are the verses that stand out in the Quran. Some people, they like to give fatwas saying that you cannot repeat certain verses of the Quran only. You cannot just highlight the whole of the Quran is important. The whole of the Quran is a revelation. And that's something we understand. The whole of the Quran is revelation. But in the Quran, there are surahs and verses that Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself said that they're given precedence. Like example, the verse that speaks about the conduct of mu'amalat, right? It's important. It's a revelation, but it is not the same stature as the one of the verse of Surah Ayatul Kursi, because one speaks about Allah one speaks about Allah. So, and one is talking about the how do we ta'zim, the transcendency of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The other one speaks about commerce. How do we buy and sell? You shouldn't cheat with your skills, etc. In your skills. All these are important. So so in that sense, we can understand, yes, the whole of Quran is revelation, but there's some verses that Allah makes them, the heart of the Quran or the light of the Quran or this or that. They are same like Rasuls. There are all Rasuls are given nubuwah, but there's only one which is the final messenger or the Imam of the messenger. So in that sense, yes, like Rasulullah says, do not raise me above Yunus ibn Matta. It's true, but at the same time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him certain fadl that he did not give to the Anbiya before. So, but all of them are Nabi, are Rasul, in that sense. They receive revelation. They are given the nubuwah, but their ranking may not be the same. So the same with certain verses in the Quran. So that's why we repeat example, Mithal Yasin, or we repeat Ayatul Kursi, or we repeat this and that. And what brings me to this about Al-Quran is that in terms of this is about taking care of our amal and ibadah, and knowing the time and the days that we're living in, and how this is very important in preparing ourselves for our next phase in life. So, mithal as an example, when we do worship, example, in the past, because the Muslims community was so strong with their remembrance, their dhikr with Allah, and they were very cautious in not falling into sins. This created a sense of protection for the Muslim community. And when there was once when the Christians wanted to attack Alhambra, so they sent spies to look at Alhambra, and they brought back, they said, how can we attack them now? And they said no, because they're busy studying, they're busy remembering God at night, and they're not sinning. So there's very little people that are sinning. So, okay, fine. So we don't attack them now. Then the second time, the third time, and then the fourth time, the spies said, look, now they are drinking wine, they are celebrating too much. That means it's always like a party. They are drowned in frivolous poetry, and they're not making zikr. So that means that protection is already gone. And that's how the Alhambra fell. And if we look at it now, our Muslim community right now, because we're very distant from the dhikr of Allah and the dhikr of Allah through the Quran, through these great verses, and also because we're constantly sinning, the Muslim community is sinning, it is easy for us to have people to come in to corrupt our knowledge. And this makes us weak. This makes us weak. And that example, when we sin, there's a lot of people who sin on the land. It decreases the fishes in the sea. So there is an effect, because the destruction on this earth comes from the hands of the descendants of Adam. So basically, we destroy everything with our own hands. It doesn't mean because we just go and destroy nature, that's one. But it also means that we destroy our communities and the world around us by our sins. Right? So what has happened now, according to scholars, is that there is still like a general protection for the Muslims, but it's not as strong as it used to be. In fact, we can see it's decreased a lot. But there is the inayah and the protection on individuals that engage in worship. So if you are active in your worship, and you strive to protect hifzul badani min al ma'asi, and you strive to protect yourself from sinning, then there will be that protection. But it is for you. Now then, you include your family in it. So your family has it. And then you try to include a small group of community in it. So they together. So example, like we recite Wirdu Salam as a community. This community that comes together to recite Wirdu Salam will have an effect on those that are around us. Not necessarily like the whole Muslim community. We never know Allah's rahmah, mashallah. But for sure, we know, inshallah, there will be an effect on those around us. And at least for ourselves. So, communal engagement in worshipping Allah has very deep impact. It's very deep impact. So, upon the family, and that is the reason why it is important for us to observe these small changes that happen when we start to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our problem is we only start to notice the hardship that comes along. Oh, I started to pray, suddenly I lose my job. I started to make salawat, and then, this happened to me, I became ill, etc. We're noticing that because before that, we never noticed how much bala there was in our lives. But through worship, we realized that there is a lot of bala, and how we actually oppress ourselves with our own sinning. So again, it is as important that we start to create communities such as this, even if it is 15, 20 people who are constantly engaged in the remembrance of Allah. So if we take care of our families, ourselves and our families, save yourself and your family from hellfire. The ahl here is not just your immediate family, but also the people that you take as family, in a sense, your companions, your friends of sohbah, your jama'ah in the khanqa, all of these people, they too. So people who associate themselves with good people. So let's say if people at old age, then they start to repent, it is important that they to start to associate themselves with people who are ahl al-khair, people who do good, because they too will benefit from these people. That is the reason why Islam is not a religion that we practice, it's not an individualistic religion, which doesn't make sense. And because the Quran is such that it is not an individualistic book, it doesn't teach you to be an individual. But it guides you to have faith with Allah, following the way of the Prophet ﷺ, and following the way of the Sahaba, which means there is a group, there is a jama'ah, there is a congregation. But in modern understanding of Islam, it is what you take Islam to be, which it doesn't function like that. Quran does not work like that. Quran is a book that engages the community, that builds community, that is in itself a structure. Maulana Fazlur Rahman Ansari, this great scholar, he was the son-in-law, still is, he's the son-in-law of Maulana Abdul Alim As-Siddiqui. So he wrote this book, maybe one of you can Google. It's about it's 2 volumes. It's about communities and societies, Quranic perspective of communities and societies. Very advanced for his time, mashallah. But it talks about the structures of communities and societies. I used to have the book, but I gave it away. Maybe I should get it again. It was republished by IBT. Let me see if I can find it now. Yeah, so he has these books, the Quranic foundations, and structure of Muslim society. Interesting, it's put under forgotten books. When I bought it, I was really young. I just, I was, I'm sharing it in the chat, inshallah. You young people, I know, the young ones, they can find PDF of almost everything. So if you have a PDF of this, it'll be interesting. Yeah, Quranic Foundations and Structure of Muslim Society by Maulana Fazlur Rahman Ansari. Uh, he talks about it means what it means, the Quranic foundations and structure for society, which is a very interesting thing. He's a great philosopher, but some people take his work and they spin it to uh, their own political things. But if you just see his work on his own, it has a lot to offer. It was once published by IBT, Malaysia, Islamic Book Trust, Malaysia. He came to Singapore a few times back in the 60s, no, in the 70s, to continue the work of his father-in-law, Maulana Abdul Alim Siddiqui, the founder of IRO, International Religious Organization of Singapore, and also the Masjid Abdul Alim Siddiqui and Jamia itself. Yeah? So, yeah, if you have time for that, inshallah. Okay, coming back. So, why is this important? Because right now, if we look at it, we're talking about ageism, right? So, people who are reaching the age of seniority, but they have not been able to age with community. And our current society is facing this problem because now we have a lot of individual seniors who are living on their own and they don't want to be with people. By their age, if you never live with community and society, you wouldn't want to, because that's just how it is. So the human mind works like that to a certain level, and maybe because of because of shame, because of this, because of that, and it's like that. So I mean, traditionally, our Muslim communities would be attached to the surau, would be attached to the masjid, or be attached to a majlis yasin tahlil, will be attached to a majlis berzanji, etc. And they will grow all with these majalises. So this becomes actually a support. Now, as society becomes more materialistic and they view organic communities such as this as being backward or being troublesome or being a threat, which actually they're not, it's just some people see it as a threat for some reason, I don't know why, then there isn't an organic support for the community. Especially here in Singapore, losing this. A lot of people don't go to masajids as much as they used to, because life is now revolved around what the person does at home. They're not connected to the masjid as it used to be. And now when we try to remedy that, it becomes very difficult, because there's a whole time frame that we've lost with this, and people become very myopic. And instead of wanting to understand scholarship, like traditional Turath scholarship of Quran, being engaged with it and grow old with it, like what Maulana Fazlur Rahman Ansari is showing, we then start to interpret the deen on our own, and we live on our own. That becomes even more dangerous. So it is important that we start to understand that we need communities. There was once I visited. I was with a group of Malaysians, and we visited this local learned man, mashallah. And then my friend introduced me, and he had to introduce me this way. He said, "Oh, this is Ustaz Mohsin. He's here to create communities." And then this was early in the work when we just started. The man got really angry. He says, "Oh no, people, not anyone can create communities. Only murshids can create communities." And I just kept quiet. And I mean, he's staying on it. I mean, he has his own family, but he seems to be very, very rigid, And that's the problem, is when we start to grow old on our own, and we just grow old with our own knowledge, and we're not growing old in expanding the knowledge that we have. I've seen my grandfather. I mean, he was 80 and he was 70 plus, and he did a diploma. He was 80 and he was still seeking knowledge. Our Murshid Khaja Habibullah Shah, he had, he finished his suluk, and then he was given the opportunity to re-suluk again, in that sense, with Bil Khair Muhammad Siddiq. He continued his journey. So it's how we handle a more individualistic world that we live in today. So growing old and not being able to connect with a community is actually very dangerous, if you ask me. And the other problem is, in the secular world, we tend to separate. The youth are like the cream of the crop. So they usually won't mix with the seniors or those who are young, maybe younger than them, but they won't mix with the elders. They're like the cream of the crop. So what happens is, you have people who are seniors and they're left on their own. So we build special institutions for them, which is good, but then it does not involve the other communities, and this is something which is actually sad. But if you look at the organic community structure, like a masjid of the Prophet ﷺ, then you get people who are senior, and then you get the people who are very young, and they actually, because of the structure of the masjid, they come together, and because of the way traditional societies work, we value our seniors, and that value of the seniors in turn gives dignity to the seniors, and the seniors know that they now have to be more like what Imam Haddad has mentioned. Their dignity, the level of dignity has raised, because the way the community treats them, and the way their reverence has also increased. So they wouldn't misbehave, or because of how the society looks at them. But because of materialism, because of postmodernity, and whatever that we have today, and how we interpret the deen, the seniors are now looked upon as a burden, but not people of barakah. And these are Muslims. I mean, look at the adverts in Malaysia. Every other year, when it comes to Ramadan or Hari Raya, you see a very sad advert about how you should be treating your parents, etc. And this is happening in Malaysia. What more in Singapore? Only the things are not shown. These are all hidden, and households and upper. So the Lives of Men is actually a very important book. Doesn't talk about just our journey, but if you look at it, it talks about how the journey of others will also have an impact on us, and how we should also have good adab with those around us, especially here in this discussion, the seniors. Any person of this age not conforming to this pattern will be thought of as ugly of behavior and reprehensible of conduct, right? Dah tua, macam orang kata, the word buang tabiat. Buang tabi'ah. Ada tabi'ah je dah buang. So it's like you are ennobling, you're taking on wrong habits, which is not appropriate for the age. So age appropriate is also something which is important in ourselves. I mean, we cannot be behaving like how we were when we were 15, when we are like 40 or 50 or 60. And those who are 20 cannot be behaving like they're 60, because that is something that you get when you get there, that reverence and respect. But today we see there was once there was a group of people that came to meet the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it was a mixed group. There was the youth, there were the young ones, and there were many senior ones. And the young one, when they sat down, the young one started to speak, and the Prophet ﷺ says, be quiet, be quiet. There are those who are elders than you, let them speak first. And today we have etiquettes of young people who 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 are uninvited in the conversations of the seniors, or when the elders are speaking, they just butt in. My mother used to say, orang tu berbual jangan masuk campur. When the elders are speaking, you don't get involved. And which is something that is still practiced in traditional communities and societies. Even among scholars, we've heard, I've heard this from some of my friends who studied in Syria, and they said, here, the young scholars don't speak. Only the older ones will speak out about certain matters. And if the young scholars speak about certain matters, they say it's wrong of adab. And even in our tariqah, there is a hierarchy in that sense. When the elder khulafas are speaking, the younger ones, we don't get involved. No, we're supposed to be just at the background in the elders when they are present. But but the problem starts when people misuse this to bully the young ones. And that's because they never lived in congregation, so they misuse their seniority to bully the younger ones, and that's a problem. Like you're throwing your seniority rank around. It doesn't work that way. As much as there is respect, but we must also understand there isn't an in crowd. There's no in crowd. The in crowd are those who have taqwa to Allah. So that still is mashallah. So the seniors must see, if the younger ones have taqwa, then we should give them room for them to grow and to bring in. So there is outreach in that sense. And these are important in congregation, giving everybody their dues, and respect, etc. Then we too would be respected. May Allah grant us this. But again, we see this by example. So that is the reason why we shouldn't allow bad example to grow in congregations. We shouldn't allow bad examples to grow in congregations, so that the congregation, the jama'ah, always would be healthy. Like cliques is a problem. Having friends that you sit with in a jama'ah is not a problem. But once the clique starts to control the emotions of the jama'ah, then that becomes a problem. You see? And then, so these are the things. How does the jama'ah always find freshness when they're with each other? And how do we hold complexities? How do we hold each other? These are all part and parcel of the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And this is what keeps the young ones in their place, and the elder ones also in their place. And this is important. But it takes a lot of good examples, a lot of patience, a lot of wisdom, and it's good to have a congregation that is mixed with seniors, with young ones, with youngers, so that everybody has a role and everybody takes care of each other, and that's how it's supposed to be, inshallah. But it's never easy. It's never easy. And shaitan will always want to test a group like this. So if you see the group being tested, it means it's good lah. They're probably on the right track. I'm trying to say. So it's and how does the group overcome those tests and all those kind of things, and how do they then mature with those challenges, etc. Mashallah. In the authentic hadith, about the three kinds of people to whom God does not speak, look at, or purify on the day of rising, and who have a painful punishment. May Allah protect us. One of the three is the adulterous old man. The abhorrent depravity is even more abhorrent and depraved in his case. Because of his age and his supposed fear of God, apprehension, gravement, and shame before God. There's a footnote. Let's have a look at the footnote, number 12. Nothing could be more striking than the contrast between the upright dignity of an elderly Muslim surrounded by respectful family and friends, and the unseemly descent into churlishness and hopeless desire so common among aging unbelievers. This is, like we have the problem, the case of people who, when they receive the CPF and then they go, they go and find gallivanting outside, etc. Now, the problem this happens is because society doesn't take care of men anymore. When the voice of feminism becomes the dominant voice of society, men, in that sense, lose their roles as well. And this is a problem today. We have, and now we have the feminists who says, "Oh, there's no more men," and so what happens is that it becomes the work of scholars or religious teachers and even parents to make sure that they mold men. And a lot of time in this day and age, we see women who behave like men in the way they speak, and the way they carry themselves, etc. And that is really a work of the work of the modern day feminism that just causes a lot of imbalance in characteristics and how character should be developed, and it's sad. So that's because of the loss of logic, the loss of proper akida, the loss of history. Like yesterday, I was watching this video on IG, and it showed a video from Wolverhampton back in the 60s. I think it was in the 60s. And it showed this dress on the mannequin that was basically the top was just bare, very bare. And then the woman, they stopped, the TV host stopped the woman in the streets of Wolverhampton and said, "Would you wear this?" And all of them said, "We wouldn't wear it." Because they say this is ridiculous, there's no dignity in it. Or one of them even said this is something like the woman in London would wear, not in Wolverhampton. But what changed that? This is probably about 50 years. And how much has changed in 50 years? You see, from that, what we've seen in the 60s is not too far away to what we're looking at now. So men don't behave as men anymore, and women don't behave as women anymore because of how society is functioning. And if at that level we have that, imagine how all seniors would be behaving then. You see, so there's everything. One of the works of ulama, if we see, when we read example proper ulama like Imam al-Ghazali or Ibn Juzay al-Qalbi or Ibn Qayyum, some of these great shayukh, when you read, or even Imam Shafi'i, Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, you read their stories and the way they think and the way they do their work. Even Sahabas, if you look at it, they all think with systems. What does it mean? That everything is connected. The Quran is like that. Everything is connected. If you know, like example, zina, Allah says, La taqrabu zina. Do not come close to zina. It's not, do not do zina, do not perform zina. No. La taqrabu zina. Do not come close to zina. And then Allah says, in another verse, the sinner for the sinner. So how do we understand these verses? And how do these verses shape our communities and our societies? Because if we practice them, and what can we look forward to? So it's, there was once my grandfather used to narrate this story. He says there were Sufis who moved to a town, and then they saw the stray cat, and the stray cat was in a bad shape, and they said, "Look, we're not going to live here because the people in this town won't be able to. They don't have rahmah in their hearts." So they left. No, without even speaking to anyone. They just saw the cat, and the cat was in such a state, and they left. And they went to another city and the town, and they saw that the stray cats were taken care of. And they said, okay, we'll stay here. Because if they can take care of the cats, that means these people have compassion and rahmah. So they will take care of us, inshallah. I mean, simple things like that. But we live in a place where it's not about taking care of the cat, but we already use, the authority of the tissue paper pack to say we're here. It's to mark our territories, even at the hawker center. So, macam mana agaknya? How would it be when you grow old, walking around with tissue paper? And then that has two meanings, right? People who grow old walking around with tissue paper. One is they're either selling it, or they used it to choke tempat lah. But that's how we are today, is how we would be growing old later. And that's how we would be taking our last breath, because these are from the habits that we create. Allah Ghafurur Rahim. Allah's rahmah is mashallah. But also the effort on our part to make sure that we cultivate the values of Iman. That's most important. And this is something that we need to start with ourselves, with our families. We need to be able to identify what is morality, mithal. What is immoral. And we're in the month of Quran, the month of Al-Furqan. The criterion in yesterday was, Badr. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Al-Quran as the Furqan, the criterion. And ulama mentioned that when Allah repeats something in the Quran, it is not a repetition. It means something new. And that's how clear and precise Quran is. It means something new. So when he says Bismillah, in the Holy Quran, before every verse, for us, Shafi'i, we accept that it is part of the Quran. It means something new. Every time we see Bismillah. Yesterday I was quoting this in the talk as well. فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا إِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. It is not a repetition, as much as linguistically it might seem, but actually it means something new. So we need to work towards being able to access the Quran such. And when we have linguistically, or even through essence and meaning, through works of scholars like Imam al-Ghazali, Imam al-Nawawi, how they talk about the Quran and how we should be approaching the Quran, what we actually see is that it is a reflection of the life of Sayyidina Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So if you study the life of the Prophet, automatically you need to be looking at the Quran. It will channel you back to the Quran. And if you study the Quran, automatically it will pull you towards the heart of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that's how we study. It's all connected. This book of Imam al-Haddad, Mithal, is very connected to other big kitabs of Imam al-Ghazali, is connected to the Quran, the life of the Prophet ﷺ. And then this becomes ways that we can actually mold or model our lives upon. We live in a time that we model our lives upon insurance plan, we model our lives on healthcare plan, gym plan, macam plan gitu. But okay, fine. But we don't model our lives upon, by this age. What are the practices of the Sunnah must I be engaged in by this age or by this time? How can I be spiritually close to the Prophet ﷺ? How do I meet the Prophet ﷺ in my life? Because it is a waste if we live our life, but we have yet to see the Prophet ﷺ, or yet to, because of the illnesses that we still keep. It's not the Prophet doesn't want to meet us, but because of the illnesses that we have, we're not able to see that beauty when we read the Quran. It's a waste, right? Like yesterday we were saying, how the Salih people who are pious, they will work for 11 months, and every month they will save a bit so that in the month of Ramadan they wouldn't work. They will just focus in the month of Ramadan. And Imam al-Haddad has mentioned if you can preserve 12 Ramadans, and if you really work hard for 12 Ramadans, right, you would have worship Allah for 1,000 years. Because every one night is of Laylatul Qadr is equivalent to, like Imam al-Haddad was mentioning, 1,000 months, Alf Shahr, for 83 years and 4 months. So he says, Imam al-Haddad says, if he does this every night of destiny for 12 years, for instance, it would be as if he had lived 1,000 or more years in God's obedience. That means 1,000 or more years in ta'ah, khusus fi ta'atillah. So that's a great ibadah, mashallah. So how do we model our lives and make Allah our agenda in our lives? Not our dunya, but Allah is our agenda. And this then we'll start to understand وَمَن يَتَقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَل لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. If society is already corrupted at that level, then our seniors also would have a very difficult time in trying to preserve this dignity that they have. So it is really important that we try to have this, inshallah. White hair usually appears at this time for someone whose hair turns gray while a Muslim, it becomes a light for him, the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So, هذا نور. It has been related that the first person whose hair turned white was Sayyidina Ibrahim Khalilullah alayhi salam, who asked, "Oh Lord, what is this?" His Lord answered, "This is dignity." So he said, "Lord, give me more dignity." So how should we be aging is that we should age with this dignity. And it is impossible to age with dignity without ilm wa amal. And if you have to ask in number 3, sohbah, which is part of knowledge as well. If you read Ihya al-Ulumuddin, it talks about the etiquettes of you having with this teacher. And I've seen, mashallah, how my grandfather is when he is with his teacher. He's meek and he's just quiet. And in fact, his teacher is younger than him. He's about 10 years younger. And his teacher will call him affectionately Nana. Nana in Tamil means like an elder brother used among Tamil Muslims, Nana. It's a very affectionate way of calling an elder brother, Nana. My grandfather would call him Murshid. And his Murshid was 10 years younger than him. So, but there was no airs. He was still look down, he meet his sheikh, he would speak meekly, he wouldn't look at the sheikh in the eye, and all of this. That's proper adab there, right there that we see. But today's day and age, we sit with our sheikhs, but again, I heard some teachers, they say, we're not good teachers, so we don't have good students. Well, maybe our students are better than us. I like to think like that. But it is true. We don't get people like Imam al-Ghazali anymore. We don't get people like Imam al-Haddad anymore. Finish. whose days are filled with 200 rak'ah days, belum night. So these are the people whose they are revered because of their proximity to Allah. And to get there, we need this ilm, amal wa suhbah. Because we can only learn this when we see how our elders behave as such. And how our elders behave as such. So may we inherit the good acts of our elders, inshallah. Yeah? White hair is a reminder of the nearness of one's time and the necessity of folding up the spread carpet of hope. It proclaims the imminence of one's departure and rapidity of change. And they say that white hair brings with it suspicion that one's time has come. It is the banisher of hope. MashaAllah. And at the same time, Imam al-Ghazali has mentioned that it is important that when the time is nearing, we increase in our hope as well. But what Imam al-Haddad is trying to say is that there's no time to play around if you start to see your white hair coming out. There's no time for you to be thinking about dunya. In fact, if you were to ask me, by the time you've reached 35, it is time to get serious. By the time you reach 35, it is time to, that doesn't mean before that you're not serious. What it means is before that, you need to be busying yourself with the fundamentals of life, and I'm not talking about just financial preparation. I'm talking about knowledge. I'm talking about meeting great people, sitting with them, learning from them. I'm not a scholar in any way, but Allah has blessed me, and this I say with no heirs, may Allah protect me, to have met so many important people from birth, I believe, and this is the effect of my grandfather. First, of course, someone that I see from birth that leads a life that is dignified is my grandfather, number one. Number two, I was blessed that during his time he brought me to meet people. Like example, one of his teachers was Ustaz Hassan. Very firm man that teaches tasawwuf, etc. Met great people like his teacher. Another one of his teachers that I've met but I did not take knowledge from was Ustaz Ahmad Son Haji. Another one is Ustaz Taha Suhaimi, and then another one that is Ustaz Mahmoud Abdul Majid. People, you see them, you get into conversations, you hear them talk to your elders, and that is enough tarbiyah right there. And then, as my grandfather grew in age, more people visited him. One of them was Maulana Yusuf, the Muhaddith in Kelantan, and a very, very interesting meeting. Sheikh Jibril Fuad Haddad. We've met Sheikh Hisham. We've met Sheikh basically, we've met Habib Umar, met Habib Salim Shatri, I feel quite a number of people, mashallah, and each and every one of them I see, we're just blessed to have met them and to see. There was once when my grandfather organized the first Tasawwuf conference in Singapore. This was when I was in NS, and this was in 2002, I believe. I was in BMT at that point of time, but I got out. I managed to get out, alhamdulillah. And because I was part of the organizer of the conference, and it was during Duha, and this was at Suntec City. Full house, mashallah. We had Professor Malik Badri, we had one Qadri Sheikhs from Trinidad and Tobago, and then we had Sheikh Jibril Fuad Haddad. And Sheikh Jibril left an impression on me. While we were all busy having our tea break, he went to the corner and he did his duha, mashallah. I thought that was mashallah. This is in Suntec City. This is before all the social media hype about people praying at car park, about block, that kind of thing. And this thing leaves an impression on you because they're elders, you see. So you see them being successful in their life of worship, and this inspires you. This inspires you to be like that as well. And so when you are young, it is easy to leave the impression on, being left an impression on. So make sure if you are young, make sure you have a good impression of the elders and seniors, because that is how you would mold your life. That's how you would mold your life towards. And I believe where I am today is because of the impression that my grandfather left on me. And he was where he was because of the impression his father left on him. So his father was a very man of dignity. He was a great supporter of Maulana Ali, uh, the Indian nationalist that worked for the independence of India, and he would dress like Maulana Ali himself. He lived in Burma, in Mandalay, and my grandfather was he has friends who are intellects of his time, and they will talk about the politics of the time. And this is back in the 1920s. I was fortunate to have met many people from the 1920s who lived before electricity, and they lived before electricity means before everything that we know today. And they led a very different life. They led a life which was definitely more resilient. They were more brilliant. The way they think and the way they work, they were more sharp. They were more aware of things, very resourceful. This was before electricity. The minute we got electricity, we became lazy, if you were to ask me. We don't know how the end of times will be like, So anyway, coming back. So he said there was once while they were talking, and then one of the men saw the shooting star. And my grandfather was a young boy, so he was not able to sit in to listen. He listened from the room out beside. And the man says, the ulama, there's someone like an ulama who just passed away. And true enough, weeks later, there were a lot of scholars that were killed during the Turkish Ataturk invasion. I mean, mashallah, they were so connected with their environment that their religion, the deen, made them connect with the environment in such that the environment was able to tell them of the dangers that were to come. Just like how when the tsunami was about to approach and people were saying they saw birds and animals that were just running. And human, we're supposed to have the akal, but it seems that the animals are more receptive towards nature than we are. And we've lost this to a certain degree. So people who are more elder, like I used to learn Quran from this lady called Nenek Watini. She is the mother-in-law to Ustaz Ghaus Khan Surati, our teacher, Ustaz Ghaus Khan Surati. So we know Ustaz Ghaus from, we were very young, mashallah, and because of Nenek Watini. So Nenek Watini is this healer that we had at Bukit Panjang. My mother, during the pregnancy of my sister, was it my mother? I think it was my mother. There was a complication in the womb. Nenek Watini was just able to take her hand. She placed her hand on my mother's womb, and she just turned. The child went back to the normal position. MashaAllah. My grandfather will go to her to get water. Nenek Watini. She's Ahlul Quran. She teaches the Quran. Very beautiful lady, simple lady, very simple lady. Sometimes you even see her teaching Quran just pakai serokop, and just it's very simple, no complication, no nothing. It's very easy. But the barakah this lady has is just mashallah. No waswasa, very firm lady, very she would come and she would massage my late grandmother. And there was once I was lying down and my feet was on the sofa. I was on the floor and her feet was on the sofa. And she came out from the room, and I remember, and she said, a man shouldn't lie down like that. Well, I was a young boy. I was only primary 3, and then 4. And she said a young man shouldn't lie down like that. And I asked why. And she explained to me why. So it is very, if you were to see her, she is very gentle, but very firm, and very straightforward as well. That's what we're lacking in today's world. Yeah, we live in a time that we can't correct others because of whatever we think. So we lose that tradition that we can inherit from our elders. And there are many sciences of knowledge. I've heard this from many alims. They said, they have mastered many sciences of knowledge, but only a few were useful because people approach them only for a few matters. So the rest of the knowledge, if they go, these knowledges would go with them. Same like Nini Watini. I mean, she was not a scholar, but she was definitely a teacher. She taught Quran to many people in Bukit Panjang, etc. And she healed many people, and she helped many people, and she definitely was a very spiritual woman. Right? So that's how she was an elder. So when she passed away, it's quite sad, but I think I'm more sad now. Now that I'm approaching this seniority, I wish I had more time with her, because there's more than we didn't know who we had when we had them. That's the problem. So when they are gone, then we go like, I wish I sat down and talked to him about this. I wish I talked to her about this. I wish I had this. I wish I had that. Like if Ustaz Abdullah was around, what would we be asking him? Ustaz Abdullah was one of them, of the many. We had many people like this in Singapore. Many, mashallah. Kiais and all that kind of thing. They were not necessarily influencers. They didn't have to have a social media account, but they were very learned. Not all of them went to Azhar also, but they still had a lot of corpus of knowledge, mashallah. So this is frightening when the community is functioning without knowledge like this. It's frightening. If you were to ask me, it's very frightening. So it is about time that we also look back at knowledge from a traditional point of view, not only from a scholastic point of view, the tools there that are needed for the common people as well, but also to be inheriting back the knowledge of our elders of the past. How did they lead their lives, etc., etc. And this is not based on even Western tradition. This is based on the tradition here. This is before we go for courses of natural party in England. This is like naturopathy here. Nusantara. So may we inherit that knowledge, inshallah. Thank you all of you for your time, inshallah. And I hope that Allah will give us a very dignified age of seniority when we reach there. Allah will bless us with more blessed seniors, inshallah, that we have around us. May Allah increase their life so that we receive their du'as. Murshid always says, dua for the long life of our blessed mothers and fathers, the elders, because we need their du'as. Just for a simple factor like that, Prima always says that because we need their du'as. And may Allah grant the acceptance of du'as of our elders, inshallah. May we benefit from them, inshallah. So thank you all of you. If you like to contribute, you can do so through our sister. Thank you, Sister Rihanna. Aisha, or my wife, 86682295, inshallah. Your donation will help us go a long way in the work that we do, inshallah. Till we meet again tomorrow, inshallah. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, Farah. Thank you, Sue.
Waalaikumsalam, Mushid. Thank you, Mushid.
Waalaikumsalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, Anissa. Thank you, Shazana. Wa iyyakum.